hello there, humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you're lucky enough to be doing it too. Great work there on the microphone. Drop mic, walk off stage. I'm Bushka on Blitz, and I'm back with another dose of tanking love, affection, and joyous proclamation. This time it is about the Van Helsing, the Tier 7 TD that has been released by Wargaming to coincide with this Halloween event. Now, it's quite an interesting looking tank. I love the way it looks. Some people don't. We're not going to go there. I'm just simply going to be talking about its performance today, how you can best use it, the things to watch out for, why a part of it is overpowered and why a part of it is horrifically underpowered, and how you can minimize one and maximize the other. Now, this is a patron-sponsored post. If you haven't heard about Patreon, click on the link here. It'll take you through. We do a whole heap of stuff. Basically, we sit around, talk in voice and chat channels, do events. There's private videos for sponsors only, all kinds of gear. This tank has the propensity to be incredibly overpowered, and it has basically what you'd call a very high ceiling. When it does well, like this, you can put 400 plus damage into a tier 8 tank like the IS-3, which is very strong at quite a distance, at very, very quick rate of fire, and be very, very happy about your day. But it doesn't always do that. The gun itself is the most interesting part of the tank. It's a auto loader that fires 2 shots. Both shots are 200 alpha. The gun's on paper just fine. 0.36 dispersion, 2.1 second aim time. Where it falls down is that there is a bloom on the second shot. Even though it is apparently a quarter of a second, the distance between the first shot and the second, what you're going to find with this tank is that both shots do not often hit. Or if they do, it's only because you're in very close proximity to the enemy. When it works well, and when they both hit, and you get a sequence where they both hit, the tank is devastating. It's pumping out 400 alpha every 10 seconds. In fact, that's not correct, because if you run all your bobs and whistles, your vents, your double rations, and all that kind of thing, it's actually 400 alpha every 8.8 seconds, which means that overall you can do 2700 DPM, which is great. You can't run rammer on it because it's an auto loader. You can't run, sorry, not rammer. You can't run your adrenaline because it's an auto loader. It doesn't really make any difference. The penetration numbers on the gun are crap. 170 is your penetration on your AP rounds, and 220 is your penetration on your APCR. Now, there are tanks like the Comet that have tremendous doses of damage per minute, and they have much worse numbers in their actual penetration than that, and that's all well and good, and they get along with it and manage to pump out consistent numbers because those tanks are very, very quick and very, very mobile and very, very agile, and they can get around the ground and move to flanks quickly. This isn't the same thing. You've got to play this like a traditional TD, because despite the fact that it has a 60 kilometer an hour top speed and a supposed 30 kilometer an hour traverse number, it's actually not. The engine's very weak. What happens is you'll come up against tier 8 heavies, and even running APCR, which is 220 penetration, you're mostly at best gonna get one in anywhere frontally, because the bloom on the dispersion on the second shot is quite severe. It's not huge, but you can notice, like, look, that Tiger, one goes in, one doesn't. The IS-6 before it, one went in, one doesn't. And so what you're actually getting there, if that's the case, is you're not putting out 2700 damage per minute. You're putting out half that, which is not nearly as impressive. And because it's a lower caliber gun that's relying on hitting twice to do its damage, when you switch up to high explosive, as you're going to see here, if you hit any form of heavy tank, it's quite often you won't do any damage at all with HE. I'll hit this guy twice with the HE, no problems at all, nothing, not even so much as a Skerrick, because it is very low caliber high explosive. It only has 45 penetration on its HE rounds, and it only does 300 alpha even if it hits. So at best you're going to be hitting for 600, but it's very, very rare that you will. I'm not trying to talk the tank down because I actually think the tank is quite balanced. When it works, it's brilliant, and when it doesn't work, it's bloody horrible. Like you can see here, this is when it's working, and it's mobile enough, and it's very like a Russian KV-1S or an IS or something along those lines, in that its straight line speed is fantastic. Its straight line speed is great, or a Hellcat, for instance. But what it doesn't have is the ability to then turn around and brawl and dogfight. And I see quite a few people who've already got this tank start brawling and dogfighting in it, and it's got 16 degrees of traverse. But straight line, fine and dandy. And you'll see here, I've pushed straight past these guys, and then I put 2 in the side of the Ag Panther, and I'm straight down behind a hill. Happy days. That's how you're going to roll it. But if you are doing these things, you need to be firing APCR, because 170 penetration, as you saw on some of these shots, even with APCR, you'll bounce the front of these big tier 8 heavies constantly. And for a tank that has to be a TD, that's not good. If you're in a TD situation, and it's one of the reasons why I've always loved guns that have all their alpha front loaded, because you can set them up for the shot, choose your time when you're in camouflage, fire, and then back out without taking a risk. Whereas with this, that's not the case. And you'll see there again, 1 hits, 1 doesn't. And that's a very well-armoured British TD there, but for all that, we're firing the top penetration we can and just not getting it done. Now, this all goes without saying that it's a high ceiling, very low floor tank. It can be a winner or a loser based on any given situation. But there is one other thing that is a real negative on it, and that is the complete lack of gun depression. If you're a gun depression player, I mean, have a look at trying to get a shot on this KV-1S. I've got to push right over onto the downslope to get that shot, because you just can't get gun depression out of this thing. But when it works, boy, does it work overtime. And you're going to see that here in this game. This is a really good example of when you just, and this is great, I'm going to get a shot in on each of these dudes. That's fantastic. The upper glacis is pretty strong as well, but overall the armor's pants. But you will bounce some off the upper glacis, and you get the odd bounce off your turret, but the armor's not to be relied upon. Basically think of it as a grill with more turret traverse and a very different kind of gun, because it has that same straight line speed but lack of brawling ability that the grill brings to the table. And I'd love it if it was just firing one big dose of alpha at 400. But then the tank would probably be overpowered, because you'd be able to aim up that first shot really well and it would work every time, rather than being in a situation like this. Now, the other thing, as you saw there, and this is very 183. I know they're 2 Tier X tanks and they probably don't seem to have much in common with the little Van Helsing, but the 183 often has to take kill shots on tanks that are so far under the average alpha of the gun, and you just don't have a choice. If you've got a 900 damage shell in the barrel and you've got to kill someone on 120 hit points, you've got to do it often, and it's an absolute punish, and it can kill you when you're on a reload and you want to turn around. And that's less of a problem with this, but you do often come up against the fact that you'll have someone like that Hellcat who's on 26 hit points, and if it was an auto loader where you had to press the button twice, like the SP1C for instance, you could just fire off one shell and you could save the second shell, keep it in the canister, but you can't do that, unfortunately. And I like this. I think the tank is very unique, and I think it's a credit to the guys, both in terms of its artwork and the fact that they've balanced it so thoughtfully. It wasn't a tank on paper that looked like it was going to be balanced at all, but the lack of penetration numbers, the inability to control how many shots you fire, the very, very poor gun depression, and the straight line speed without great brawling ability keeps it in check. I've had some really massive games in it, and I've had some games that have been very disappointing. But for all that, it's a fun drive, and it's different, and I love different tanks. Vive la différence. I'm all about the difference. Don't give me the same cookie cutter tanks every day of the week. Give me something that's got something different to recommend it, and I'll drive it and have fun in it, regardless of what it looks like. So plenty more coming up. I'm going to do a T6 Dracula review because everyone seems to want this stuff out on the deck pretty bloody quickly. And that's to be expected because it's a big ask having to grind all this stuff. What else? The podcast is now up on iTunes. If you want to go onto iTunes, you should be able to find the Bushka on Blitz podcast. Well, I know it's been accepted and approved by iTunes, but it may take a little while to actually show up in the store. At the moment, the item is not available on the Australian store. Even though the podcast is popping, the content itself is not there. But it's on the webpage as well, www.bushkaonblitz.com/podcast. Stay tuned for the Dracula review, guys. That's going to pop up. As always, if you want to sponsor the channel, click here for the Patreon link. Heaps of content coming. I'm going to be fleshing out the reviews over the next wee while, getting some lower tier stuff on there as well. They probably won't be as extensive as the higher stuff, but they're going to pop anyway, and I think that's important. And we need to cover more. As always, boys and girls, thank you so much for watching, for giving me your time and your effort, and for spreading the word about the tank love. Look after your families. I'm Bushka on Blitz, and stay safe on the battlefield.